proposed reply envelope to every resident in the borough, will the leader of the council look into using the £30,000 parking fund to see each resident is sent a consultation pack and given a chance to object to the Thames crossing going through?
A couple of things that we need to be absolutely clear on. First of all, the responsibility for publicising and supplying information for the Lower Thames Crossing consultation rests entirely with Highways England. However, as it seems that they're not sure what it is they're consulting about, it is important that this council helps to keep local people informed about what's being consulted upon, where information can be found, and how best they can respond. Since the new year, the council has encouraged residents to first of all be aware of the issues and then to take an active part in the consultation exercise. Councillor Aker was at the Orsett Hall public meeting, and that was in fact before we knew when the consultation would start, before we knew that option A wasn't being consulted upon. Of course, we now know that option A is back on the table. So I think the council has done its best through traditional and through social media to make sure that as many people know about the consultation as is possible. I think actually we've not done a bad job of that. I've got to say, Councillor Aker refers to a £30,000 fighting fund. He was not the first member this evening to refer to a fighting fund. I think it needs to be clear that there isn't a fighting fund. I don't think such a fund would be legal. I'm not sure that we would be allowed to do it. What we have done at Cabinet, we put forward the proposal of a £30,000 pot of money that would allow us to bring in experts to support our case as our own staff are busy with day-to-day running of transport and regeneration and doing their best to try and find some spare time to look at the effects that these proposals might have. It seems sensible, and of course Council this evening has now agreed that a small sum of money should be set aside so that we can both get independent people to look at the proposals, to look at how our plans for growth and our hope for free-flowing traffic will be impacted by a crossing, provide us with expert opinion to counter what is being put forward by the government, and then if the crossing were to go ahead, to be ready and well prepared to support those residents that would be affected when it comes to helping them get the best mitigation measures that are possible against the noise and pollution that would follow. So I think in short, Madam Mayor, I don't
get clarify the position with regards to the £30,000. Has any talks with Highways England, has the point been raised that only a few wards actually have these consultation events going on? When my ward doesn't have a consultation event, but all wards in the borough are going to be affected if this crossing goes through. Have you had any conversations with them, and have they explained themselves why?
At the outset of the consultation, I argued very strongly, the council agreed and argued, that to start with, an 8-week consultation period for a scheme that will spend possibly £6 billion, £6 billion is ludicrously short. I think we've all been unhappy with the geographic spread of the kind of exhibitions and consultation events that Highways England run. You know, for instance, events in Maidstone, but not an event in Abley. I entirely agree with you. As for whether Highways England have heard what we've said, if they have, they certainly haven't decided that they're going to do anything different. I would remind everybody that we have a further public meeting tomorrow at which Highways England and our 2 members of Parliament have promised to come, and I think it would be appropriate if people put that question directly to them then.
Now, there was a slight problem with this given the amendment, and I had some discussion with Councillor Gersh beforehand, and would like to propose, if I could, a compromise between my original motion and the amendment proposed by Councillor Gersh, which would read: Thurrock Council calls on C2C Rail Company to return to its pre-December 13th timetable and to swiftly add sufficient carriages to the current time to the pre-December 30th timetable to adequately cover the demand for services in Thurrock. So, 2 slight changes for a compromise amendment that I think would satisfy the commuters and travellers on the C2C who have complained to me in their hundreds over the past few weeks.
I just need to check if we can do that, please. Okay, yeah. Okay. Is that the seconded? Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Aker, go ahead.
Thank you much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gerish, for the amendment, and I'm glad we've reached a compromise. When C2C changed this timetable, before that, things were going quite well. C2C was one of the highest regarded train operating companies in the country, and in my years of commuting into London, I never really had a problem with it. I get complaints about housing repairs, all sorts. Not one on the C2C network. Not one. You wouldn't see anything on social media about it, the odd grumble here or there for a train cancelled, but that would happen to any operator, and it would happen under any management structure the rail network was under. And then along comes December 13th, and C2C's argument for the change in the timetable was a shocking 15% extra capacity it had to carry, seemingly from December the 12th to December the 13th. And the result has been chaos, with some suggesting that C2C stands for calamity to chaos. It is not on. There have been numerous meetings, not just that I've had with C2C, but also Sir David Amis, the Conservative MP for Southend, has been very vocal in this. He has tried to get meetings with C2C management. He's appealed for them to make some changes. In fact, I met with C2C before Christmas and discussed with them some possible changes. I was willing to be flexible with this, and they were willing to be flexible as well. And they would say they would make changes in elements of the timetable where there was particular stress and where things weren't working out. And we had the promise as well that more carriages were going to be ordered, which fell through in the last week. It has not worked. C2C, I think in 2006, changed its timetable, and the public outcry was such that they had to revert back to it, and they did, and they were commended at the time. And since then, C2C has had a very high public approval rating until this change. When I get messages that pregnant women have to stand longer than 20 minutes in the franchise agreement, it's just appalling. They shouldn't have to stand at all. When people are crammed into the metro trains, which have fewer seats at rush hour, when 8, 12 carriage trains are reduced to 4 during the rush hour, that is not acceptable. When people have to pay more for this service, that is not acceptable. What I would appeal to is for every member to urge the Council to put pressure on C2C to make these changes, and if necessary, ask the Council's solicitors and legal staff to look into whether C2C is in breach of its franchise agreement, because this cannot go on. If we have trains crammed, as it is, in the summer months, people will fall seriously ill. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with now, so that in the summer we're not having to talk about this again, with people feeling very ill on a daily basis and having to pay thousands of pounds for the privilege to do so. So I hope we can get unanimous approval on this. I hope we can stand by our commuters, and I hope we can convince C2C with this action to revert to their old timetable and provide more carriages. Thank you.
I too do use that service, and I've noticed that it's become somewhat overcrowded, to be polite, and you do have to stand up from Grays into Fenchurch Street, so it isn't acceptable, and I'd certainly support the motion this evening, and I would urge our Chief Executive really to have meetings with this organisation so that our residents are protected. And Councillor Aker, you are absolutely right. It was a good service, nice air-conditioned carriages, and now they've reduced them. And I've been up to London, and I'm coming back, and I've come back through to West Ham, and there's a sudden rush to the trains, and people are clamouring to get on, and most people, you know, you're 3 or 4 deep, and it just doesn't happen. And of course, what then is a concern, and you're right to bring it up, is one, public safety. Because I would hate for someone to slip on one of those lines, because people do surge and they squash themselves in, and it's most...
And as mover of the amendment that's been seconded, so first of all, I do welcome this motion. And I do welcome Councillor Aker accepting some of those core elements of the amendment that I have put forward. And I think that does bring us much closer in terms of our thinking on a resolution, and certainly we are agreed that this cannot go on. However, I think in terms of putting options to the council, it is important that I still put this amendment. And the reason for that is that there are, I think, a slight differing of opinions in terms of what the best approach is in dealing with this situation that is clearly unacceptable. But I would make clear as well, Madam Mayor, that if that amendment is not accepted this evening, I will vote for the motion as in the original version. And the reason that we're splitting hairs a little bit on the and or the ors, and I don't think it's because I want everyone to be debating Boolean logic at 10:10 at night when we've had a very late evening already. It's because in terms of what I view as the most appropriate response to the issue, is that it's the number of carriages in service that's the key issue with the new timetable. Now, my advice to Council, as the portfolio holder, is that in some areas, to name Grays, Shafford 100 and Ockenden, going back to the old timetable as is would mean a loss of services, a loss of carriages, and actually a missed opportunity to plan for growth over the next few years with the ability to layer in additional capacity. Just so members are aware, in terms of the services and the carriages available across the borough, in Grays it's moved from 20 to 24 peak services, up 8 carriages across those periods. In Shafford 100 it's moved from 8 to 12 services, up 50%. And from 60 to 80 carriages, and in Ockenden again the same, up from 8 to 12 services and from 60 to 80 carriages. So we do have to be quite careful on how we move forward, and this is against a backdrop of some increases in passenger numbers of up to, let's take the example of Ockenden, 26.5%, very significant numbers. So my caution, I guess, to the Chamber is that we are careful that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot in trying to improve the situation, although we are, I'm sure, all trying to deal with the situation with the best of intentions. I think Shafford and Ockenden residents may not forgive us for making their commute even worse. So my view is that C2C needs to rapidly add additional carriages to the services that are running to deal with the level of demand that vastly exceeds capacity. They need to get extra carriages into the borough, and they need to do it quickly. If that cannot be done, then I agree, moving to the old timetable could be better than nothing for some areas across Thurrock. So I think we're all coming at this from the basic same intention of looking for the best solution to what is quite a serious problem, and a problem that for our residents has been a couple of months of absolute hell on the trains. What I want to put forward is that the capacity in carriages are the key issue.
To sound a bit like my good friend Gerard, but I go back 30 years travelling on what was then the London Tilbury South End line, and was universally known as the misery line. And in those days it was an absolute fact that there were people who were passed over for jobs in the City of London because they were commuting on the London Tilbury South End line. It was genuinely that bad. And I think what we have seen since C2C took the franchise in 1995-96, a real improvement, good level of punctuality, good level of service. I've got to say that for me, my days of travelling up on a daily basis, getting the 4:42 train out of Grays every morning, I'm glad to say are long gone. I think in C2C, the council has a really good and strong partner. C2C support us in much of what we want to do. They support much of our ambition, especially around changes in Grays Town Centre. But I have to say that part of the reason that you build strong partnerships, and part of the measure of how strong a partnership is that when you're able to look your partner in the eye and say, we think you've got this one wrong, and you need to think again, you need to take stock, and you need to put it right. So again, I'll be supporting the amendment, or I'm seconding it. If the amendment falls, then I will be supporting the substantive motion. I think it's important that we send a clear and unanimous message to C2C that they need to go back to being as well respected as they were as little as 3 months ago.
And we were discussing their issues, and they made commitments on what they were prepared to do to get themselves fixed. And one was to get new carriages quickly, to purchase, lease, or whatever it is they were going to do. They just received a new franchise. We've got 15 years of having an argument if we're not careful. I'm very disappointed in the fact that I've got an open scrutiny meeting next week. There's only one subject on the agenda, that's C2C. And nobody from C2C is prepared to come to the meeting. And that just tells me that they've got nothing to say because they haven't got a plan that's going to work. And that really is, I'm told, and Councillor Pothberry mentioned that there were more people going to the stations, so more people on trains. I understand that. The carriages and the change that they made to the timetable, they thought it was going to work. It hasn't worked. There are a number of other pinch points that are still there. One is about signalling, which is coming up at some point or other, because that will hold up trains as well. And the other one is about having a dual line further down the track. But the point I want to make is that it's not fair expecting people to be in cattle trucks while somebody's trying to fix a problem. They should be putting some emergency actions in very quickly to fix it. And if that's going back to the old timetable, then that's fine. I'm not going to comment on which motion or whatever it is that I'm supporting, but I'm frustrated with C2C greatly. And also, we talked about looking partners in the eye, but it'd be nice if they turn up to a bloody meeting.
For the summer, because then they are essentially running a massive health hazard on a track, and I think that's what we should be focusing on. The area that I'm sympathetic with Councillor Gerrish's argument is it can't be just about reversion, because C2C have said themselves have got an increase in passengers, which isn't our problem, it's their problem. But if we simply ask them to revert, then I'm concerned we're letting them off the hook on the requirement they need more carts on the tracks. And I don't just want to say to them, you've got to go back to the old timetable, because if they're saying that they're getting far more passengers than they expected, their 2019 vision is no good for us. We need them to front load that now and actually get more stops on the line. I'm reasonably happy with Councillor Gerrish's amendment because it doesn't seem to negate anything that you're saying in that regard. I know that one of the things that Stephen Metcalfe was saying to me that when he met the rail minister, that looking at relaxing the obligations placed on them for stops at Barker and Limehouse looks like something that should be done. And I also think Councillor Aker was quite right that it's quite possibly worth us having our council lawyers look at whether or not they're in breach of their franchise in any way. But certainly holding their feet to the fire on the carriage issue is something that has to be done because it's a public health issue, and as Councillor Little has already alluded to, if they're not prepared to come and talk to us, it doesn't bode well. If they are getting increased passenger numbers, which they're blaming this whole affair on, then the fact of the matter is they need to front load their plans to get more carriages on the track. That is their problem, and they can't point to increased passenger numbers and pretend that that's just fallen out of the sky and it's for other people to deal with. They are the train operator. They have to.
I am for the and motion. Why? Because the timetable doesn't work for Tilbury residents. I'm lucky enough I've got a car. I can drive to Grays to fit with the new timetable. Many of my residents don't have a car to be able to drive to another place. Then when they get to Grays, there's not exactly an abundance of car parking here. The 4 carriages, they don't work in rush hour. They still don't work at 10 o'clock in the mornings. I've got on there at 10 o'clock in the morning to go up to head office, and there's been no seats. Whilst I accept that the new timetable works for Chafford 100, Grays and Ockenden, because of growth, I don't know who's not noticed it, but there sure has been some growth in Tilbury at Tilbury Docks over the last few years, and more to be announced. So, and these people, they come in by the train. So we need the trains to be bigger and back to the old timetable. You know, I don't think that Tilbury's had a good deal out of this new timetable whatsoever. You know, so whilst I appreciate that Chafford 100, Grays and Ockenden are really pleased about it, you know, Tilbury wants the old timetable back.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I will be supporting the amendment to this motion, but as Councillor Bryman said, we had C2C come down to turned around and said, well, we've reached maximum capacity. But they did turn around and say that they would be doing their very, very best to bring in GPS braking system and extending the trains. Well, obviously they've had a problem with the trains, but I really do think that is the problem now. I don't really think it's down to the council to determine whether a private company how it runs its system. Surely its passengers or its customers will be the first ones to put pressure on those. But yes, if legal can find that it has broken its franchise, then I think, perhaps it should be passed on to the MP or whoever the appropriate service for that should be. Thanks very much.
Councillor Gurley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Literally within hours, I found out that C2C were not going to be turning up to the second hearing as we requested and as they agreed to. And I thought, that's brilliant. We've now got the right opportunity to say, if you're not going to engage with us, we're going to start saying to you, this is what's needed in Thurrock. Then tonight, obviously, we've got an amendment that's put forward, and then a counter amendment of Councillor Aker's. And I think back to what was said to me at the committee meeting. All of a sudden, we've had this, or over a period of time, so we've had a sudden increase of 15% of passengers. As Councillor Aker quite rightly pointed out, what happened between the 12th of December and the 13th of December that caused so many people to hit C2C trains that they had to completely change what they were doing? Quite frankly, I don't believe that was the case. I think the changes to the franchises mean they've had to change where they're stopping. They've had to shuffle around the limited amount of rolling stuff they've got just to try and meet what's in their new franchise. Which means we're at a problem. We're at a stage where returning just to the 13th, pre-December 13th timetable isn't enough. We also need those extra carriages. And the reason I need those extra carriages is because I would hope they'd use the time after they revert to the 13th of December, the 13th of December timetable, that they would properly map and properly work out what trains are required to go from where and when, and put sufficient rolling stock in now, not just to support what we've got now, but what we're going to be supporting in the next 5 or 10 years. Councillor Aker pointed out, obviously, we've had pregnant women standing for 20 minutes on these trains. Wholly unacceptable. Obviously, as everyone knows, but an awful lot more people would know than I thought would. My partner was recently pregnant, she's recently given birth, and on a number of occasions she'd come back at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and yes, she'd have to stand for at least 10 minutes, if not all the way. And that just isn't acceptable. And I do feel the only way that this is going to be managed is by turning back time, going back to pre-December 13th, and adding those extra trains on there. I also believe that C2C do need to come back to us and give us plans of how they're going to consult and how they're going to actually properly plan the future to make sure our residents are not in the same situation in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years time. So I will be supporting Councillor Aker's amended motion. Thank you.
Councillor Spade.
But I find myself rather in the James Horton camp. There were a simple approach that just says let's go back to how it was isn't going to deal with the scale of the problem that we have in front of us. We have got huge problems with the amount of stock that are there, and as Councillor Little said, they aren't the only issues, and C2C aren't the only audience for what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is having an adequate train service that works for people in Thurrock, that allows people to sit down in the long distances that people are talking about, with all the attendant health concerns that brings with it. We've got, as we talked earlier tonight in the growth, the regeneration items and the local plan, extensive growth coming in, and just limiting our response to this to go back to how it was doesn't strike me as a sufficient response to the challenges that are on the network.
The available consideration, if they had a choice, of course, if you have not got any alternative to travel by train, then of course they've got no influence whatsoever.
Councillor Victoria Holloway. Thank you. Councillor Snell, as a secretary, do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just briefly, I think this is a classic example of some very clever people working working with some computer models and working very hard to make sure the computer models worked so that all the people fit in all the trains and all the little models are running around the computer screen and they got it just right, said, yeah, fantastic, let's do that. But in reality, it was a complete disaster and has been, it's ongoing. No doubt they're hitting their times, but the passenger experience is terrible. Now, it seems to me a problem of their own making. You can't tell me that they were doing trains one day, that it was fine, no complaints, everybody was happy. The following day, it's a complete meltdown. They've almost done it to themselves. And I don't see any reason why they can't put back the timetable to what it was before the meltdown, increase the number of carriages, and then just for an interim period, while they work out what went wrong, and try to make sure that when they reinstate the service to a more modern service, that they actually get it right this time for the passengers, because right now they haven't got it right for the passengers. So I will be supporting Councillor Aker's amended motion.
Councillor Gersh, as moved with the amendment, do you wish to support?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think it's been a good debate and I'd agree with a lot of what's been said this evening. Clearly, just to put on a couple of points, again, it's a question of whether or not we look at just rolling back or whether it's trying to get those services into a shape where we are planning for additional future growth, and I think that's an incredibly important part of our response to this situation. We know that there's additional housing going across the borough, we know there's additional jobs, we know there is the demand that will be generated over the next few years that will mean that actually even the levels that we're talking about at the moment won't be sufficient in a few years' time. I mean, I think for that purpose, I'd say to something like Councillor Worrell, under the timetable as we've got it at the moment, I would agree. I think there needs to be more services through Tilbury. What I would say is, I guess, look, under the current arrangements, that is possible if you take one of those grey starting services and extend it to start in the east of the borough. What's not possible if we roll back to the old timetable is to put additional trains through Chapel and Rockenden, and I think that's the distinction that I look to cast between the two approaches. So, Madam Mayor, I think we need to take that broad view. It is about, can we get the capacity across the network to move people in Thurrock to where they need to be, and not to have people standing for 40 minutes, because the current situation, I think, as we would all agree, is not acceptable, and we do need to get C2C to do something about it, and to do something about it very quickly.
Councillor Aker, would you like to sum up as a mover of the original motion?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The crucial point of contention with Councillor Gersh's amendment is that word "or." Because if we pass that "or" amendment, it gives C2C wiggle room. So they can come to us and say, we are negotiating with more providers to get more carriages, and then the same will happen as happened last week. The deal will fall through. And each time we're fed the same promise time and time again, we get a step closer to summer. Packed trains, dehydration, and people passing out. If we go with the compromise, or with the "and", so you go back to the pre-December 13th timetable, and you provide more carriages, we can get the short-term fix, which is going back to the old timetable, while they find more carriages. For me, it's a win-win. We don't give C2C the wiggle room. We give them the actual benefits of the old timetable, but also the need for more carriages to fit in with the growth of the borough. And I find it, you might say, Councillor Gersh, they're running more trains, but if you're running more trains that have got fewer carriages, who does that benefit? Most people go to work at the same time. You've got to be in the office for 9, which means your platforms are packed. So along comes a 4-carriage train. Push, everybody goes on. There are more people. Another 4-carriage train. It doesn't work. I dare say many people in this chamber got the level of complaints we're getting now before. And to say that it's an easy solution, well, it was, because it worked. C2C were quantifiable under qualitative data, one of the highest regarded train operating companies in the country. And now they're one of the worst. And the longer this goes on, and if you give C2C more wiggle room, we will be here in a few months' time debating this again, with probably that gallery packed with angry people wondering why we gave C2C the wiggle room in February. So I hope my compromise amendment with the and passes.
Thank you. We'll be now voting on the amendment that Councillor Goey submitted. So, can I ask all those in favour of the amendment, can you raise your hand, please? Is this Councillor Goey's amendment which was on your desk? Okay. All those, thank you. All those against the amendment, can you raise your hands, please? So the amendment has fallen. We are now going to the original motion which was amended by Councillor Aker. Yeah, so all those in agreement with the original motion, please raise your hands.
Hands in the air.